Hello everyone, I'm Milo and welcome to my town. And welcome to a new episode of the Visual Novel Corner. Even though I started this series as a way to talk about some of the visual novels I like and usually describe them, today it's going to be a little bit different, even though it's just the second episode. Today I wanted to talk about a story regarding the Ace Attorney games, specifically the first one. I think this is one of the major visual novel franchises that exist. I don't know if they're gonna make the 7th entry, but I think the game has already enough recognition, so I don't know if I'm going to make a full video on it. However, I had this story about it that I thought it was worth sharing. And the reason that I am remembering this now is that it's roughly been 10 years since I first picked up the series. It was in 2013, roughly at the beginning of February, and I just remembered the other day about this, so I thought it was cool to share this story. It's an interesting one. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna try this animation style to represent in the video. It's gonna be kind of amateurish since I'm not actually an animator, so I'll try my best to make like a funny sequence in my video editor. I hope you like that. So it goes like this. The year was 2013. I had some friends that I had met online, and at what point they started to talk about this franchise of a visual novel. I will admit I had not played any visual novels up until that point. However, I enjoyed reading. Not that I would do it much, but a few books had caught my attention and I had really enjoyed reading them at that point in my life. So when I asked my friends to tell me about what they were talking about, they told me it was this visual novel adventure game about a lawyer and he solves cases. I thought the premise was interesting, so I decided to try it out. Back then I had a flashcard on my Nintendo DS Lite, so I found the games online and I downloaded them and I started playing them. Needless to say, I really fell in love with the games. That's why I consider the Ace Attorney franchise one of my top 3 franchises of all time in gaming. I really enjoyed it and I think I played through the first game in roughly a week. It was the beginning of my school year, so I had enough free time to do so. I really did enjoy it, so I played the first 4 cases, and then I moved on to the final case on the game, Rise from the Ashes. For those that aren't aware, this case is actually something that was added in this version of the Nintendo DS release, because it wasn't in the original version. As such, it had new features like examining the pieces of evidence with the touchscreen, and it didn't include the main story characters so much because it was made after the original trilogy. However, the way that they made it was so that it wouldn't actually affect the timeline. So by the time that they released the second game remastered, well, if you would call it remastered, for the Nintendo DS, there wouldn't be any inconsistencies. Yet they still could include this new story in the time in between the 2 games taking place. It was fine. I was liking the new character Emma, and I kept playing through the game. As I said, it doesn't really include the characters from the main franchise because it was made afterwards and they didn't want to make any continuity errors. Especially because they didn't do anything extra for the second and third games released on the DS and localized for the first time, by the way, because they were Japan exclusives before the DS. Anyway, I played through it as I would until I got to like the day 1 investigation after the first trial, and they introduced a new feature. So the assistant for this case, which was Emma Sky, she was a wannabe forensic investigator. She wanted to become that. She was like 16, so she carried around a kit of implements, and one of them happened to be aluminum powder. And what you did with aluminum powder is that it allowed you to reveal the fingerprints that someone may have left on a piece of evidence. So as I said, I was roughly in the end of this day 1 investigation thing, or at least after the trial, and we come to the point where you have to use it. So as I said, in this case there are new features that are lacking in the previous parts of the game, where you're actually using some of the DS features like the touchscreen. So you are needing to dust for some prints and you have to tap the dust, and then you need to use the microphone from the DS to blow off the excess and reveal the fingerprint. The problem happened to be that my DS's mic was broken. I guess some dust had gotten into it. My console had several years of being used at the time, and I was just completely unable to continue from this part because I couldn't blow onto the microphone, no input was received, and as such I couldn't do anything. So unfortunately I was stuck, and I was kind of disappointed, a bit sad, because I wanted to keep playing these games. But well, at that point I didn't know that that case had been added afterwards. So after I looked online, I found out that I could continue with the rest of the games and I would not miss anything since this was added afterwards. So in any case that I was able to later, I could just come back to it. So I just did that. Some weeks and months went by and I played the second and third games. Of course I completely adored them, that's why I love the franchise so much. Then I finally arrived to Ace Attorney 4, or as we know it in the West, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. It's the first game of the franchise that was actually made for the DS after the original trilogy. And as such, it had a new protagonist because they were trying to tell a new story, I guess. And additionally, the features that made their beginning in Rise from the Ashes ended up being here, so you could examine evidence with the touchscreen and some other cool features. I was playing through the game. I played the first case, which is usually the tutorial one, and then I go to the second case, when at some point we find out that the character that Phoenix made so many years ago was now the actual forensics investigator for the police, and the detective, and Apollo meets her, and I thought, oh, that's kinda cool. So even though this wasn't, let's just say, canon initially, or it's not that it wasn't canon, but it didn't really affect the overall timeline because it was made after the original trilogy, even though it was included in the first game, in between the first and second games. It was cool that they were actually bringing those elements in so that they wouldn't be forgotten. The problem is that at one point during this second case, you are once again talked about the aluminum powder and you have to use it. And this time it was a real roadblock for me because I still had the same console and I couldn't get past it. So I was a little bit deflated by this, but there was a little silver lining to it. You see, it had been already some time, I don't remember exactly the date, but we had a trip coming up with my family. I have a cousin that is many years older than me and in fact has some daughters that are close to my age, a little bit younger, but nevertheless, they live in a town a little bit away from the city, in the countryside, and it was one of the Hare's daughters' birthday, so we had been invited to go there to celebrate. The good thing is that I knew that one of them had a Nintendo DS that they had gotten at some point before, some years back. So it was perfect because I don't know if it was that immediate weekend or the following weekend that we were going to go there. So my plan was simple. I was going to go there, ask them to let me borrow their console while I was there, and I would just get past the aluminum powder sections, or in general the microphone sections, assuming that theirs wasn't broken, and that way I could continue playing through the games. Finally, the date came, we went to their house, I asked for their console as a borrow while I was there, and of course they let me because I don't think they were even using it anymore. They got it more for like a trend or anything. The first thing that I did was I proceeded through the Ace Attorney 1 or the Rise from the Ashes section of the microphone that I needed. You needed it only once in there, and then as I had predicted, the investigation phase ends and then it continues to the day 2 trial. I just decided to save there because I had been more recently into Apollo Justice and that one was more important to see the rest of the story. So I just saved and then I moved into Apollo Justice. I ended up just continuing to play Apollo Justice throughout my trip there. It was a girl's birthday party, so I didn't have too much to do, but I was just there because I was part of the family. So I pretty much kept playing on her console in case I needed to use the aluminum pattern more times. I don't really remember at this point if you need it just once in Apollo Justice Case 2 or multiple times. But either way, I used her console. I think she even lent me the charger to charge the console. I had taken mine anyways, but that was fine. We were only there like Saturday and leaving on the Sunday, so I managed to get through the entire case while I was there, and all was good. When at the Sunday afternoon it was our time to go back, I was just organizing my stuff and I saw a charger in her room, which is actually where we were staying. They accommodated in their house so our family could stay. I assumed it was her charger and I had already mine saved, so we just packed our bags and I went back to my house in my city. Turns out, when I came back to my city, that my charger was nowhere to be seen. And at that point is that I realized that the charger that I had seen there somewhere in her room, it was actually mine. I may have left it there and I didn't remember, and her actual charger was somewhere else. So I got a little bit disappointed because I was not going to be able to charge my console, and on top of that, it was somewhere else. Luckily, there was a person that was working alongside my cousin at the time, but he had his family in my city, so he was coming back here like every 2 weeks on the weekends so he could spend time with his family. So after I was aware of that, I managed to contact them, and they were coming back to the city the following week after we had been there. So I asked him to please locate my charger and keep it with him so that he could bring it the following week. All was good, it was coming back eventually. I would have been more disappointed if I had to wait like even more or just ask my parents to drive us back to that town just to get it. It's just like 2-3 hours away, but it still takes some effort and we wouldn't just go there for like a pickup and go back situation. So I was glad that that was an option. Unfortunately, I was a little bit impatient at the time and I really did wanted to see how Rise from the Ashes continued on. It had been some months, but I still kind of had the idea of what had happened in the case. So unfortunately my curiosity got the best of me and I tried to keep playing even though I had no way to charge my console. And unfortunately the battery was already pretty low. So what ended up happening is that when I was playing a little bit more through that trial day 2, the DS got in like red battery, what you could see it on the LED in the side, that it was close to being depleted. I kept playing and I think eventually it starts like bleeping, meaning that it's really going to run out. In my experience, however, usually that lasted like 10 or 15 minutes bleeping like that, so I just wanted to see more of the case and the story, and I kept playing. And when I got to like a point, I don't know if it was like after a testimony or just when it was about to begin a testimony, I said, okay, I'm going to save now to save my progress, right? That was the worst mistake I could have done, as it just happened to completely run out of battery my console as I was saving. And if you don't know, the Nintendo DS Phoenix Wright games, they save in like no more than 2 seconds. It's pretty fast considering it's just saving where in the story you are. But unfortunately it just happened to collide and the battery ran out when I was saving. I didn't know what was going to happen, I didn't know if my save file was okay. So I just had to wait a couple of days until the weekend finally came. That person came and I was able to meet with them and get the charger. Came back to my house and I charged my console at last after about a week of not being able to. And unfortunately I experienced my first ever case of save file data corruption. That's why they always tell you please don't touch the power button while it's saving, because it's overwriting the data, but if it messes up, it's corrupted. Therefore, and it told me itself, the cartridge, the save data has been corrupted, it will be now restarted. And I was now in a blank slate of Ace Attorney 1. In case you don't know, in these games you only unlock the chapters after you play sequentially through them. So now I had pretty much a fresh slate of a save file of an Ace Attorney game. If I wanted to get back to Rise from the Ashes, I would have had to play through all of the cases again, or just skip them, and that was pretty crushing, honestly. Now, the thing is, and this is the most ironic thing, I think I had made some backup of my flash card sometime in between those events. I don't remember exactly why, but the point is, I actually had a save file, the SAB file that they generate for save files of the Nintendo DS games for Ace Attorney. The only problem is that it was the one before the aluminum powder one, not after. even though I had that, I don't know why I never updated it. So I would revert back to like a more cleared save file, but not after the point that I wanted it. And of course I had my regular console now, so I couldn't actually get past that point. And that is the curse of Rise from the Ashes. Thankfully Apollo Justice only used it on that case too, so it was never an issue for me. I was able to finish the rest of the game on my own. And ironically, the aluminum powder also makes a brief return in Dual Destinies, if I'm mistaken, since Emma comes back there. Is it in there? I don't remember. Actually no, I think she's not in that, but Phoenix mentions something like, oh, there's a little something from a detective friend I had. And it's the aluminum powder. I was worried when I played it on my 3DS, however, I don't think my 3DS's mic was broken. But either way, they actually did include a button where you could actually dust it off instead of just blowing on the microphone. I think you could still do it, I'm not sure. But at the very least, there was a failsafe, so if the situation like what I experienced happened again, that the microphone was broken on the console, you could still get past it. So, 10 years after I first played the Ace Attorney games, or the first one at the very least, where I started playing these games, I still don't actually know what happens in Rise from the Ashes fully. Little bit of a spoiler, but I know who the culprit is, but I actually don't even remember most of the case, and I know who the culprit is because, well, browsing Ace Attorney groups, it's kind of inevitable, you're gonna see it. But as I said, I actually, at this point, 10 years later, I don't really remember what that case is about. Let's say that my memory is a little bit fuzzy about some of the other cases in the franchise, besides like the most pivotal ones, and that just makes sense. After time you're gonna forget some of the details. I think the whole idea of this topic came back to me because I was remembering that and I was saying, hey, maybe I should replay these Attorney games. Unfortunately, I don't actually have that much free time, and I want to experience some more stuff before I get way too busy in my life, so that's probably not gonna happen. But I did remember this little story, and I thought it was worth sharing, especially here in the Visual Novel Corner. But that is pretty much it. That is my course with Rise from the Ashes. Now, I do own the trilogy on the 3DS. I bought it off the eShop. I could have done it to get back to that point, and in fact I do believe I was replaying through Ace Attorney 1 at one point some years ago, but I think I just stopped at some point in the third case because I got too busy and then I never returned. So yeah, it's been 10 years since I started playing this series, or I got into the series, and I don't actually know what happens in Rise from the Ashes. Kind of embarrassing, but that's it. Maybe someday I'll know. I would still like to prefer to see it for myself, so I would appreciate if there's no spoilers. But do let me know what you thought of this story. As I said, I don't really think I need to introduce the Ace Attorney franchise. I think it's made a big enough name of itself, so that I don't need to do something like that. However, if you would like me to see my take and a video on the franchise as a whole someday, then let me know. I might definitely do it. Anyway, that was just the story I wanted to share. I hope you liked it. Don't forget, you'll always be welcome in our town. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.